The night had a strange stillness to it, despite the glittering lights of the city. Expensive cars rushed past in a blur, their headlights cutting through the dusk, while people in tailored coats and shiny shoes hurried along the pavement, eyes fixed on their own destinations. Nobody paused, nobody noticed, nobody cared, at least that's how it seemed. But as a little girl clutched her father's hand tightly, her small voice broke the rhythm of indifference. "Daddy, why is she sleeping here?" Ethan Blake stopped, walking. He was a man known for never stopping, never hesitating in boardrooms, never faltering in negotiations, never giving anyone a chance to question his authority. But this time, his daughter's innocent whisper made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. He followed her pointing finger, and there she was, a frail woman curled up on a bench outside the glowing mall entrance, her knees drawn. To her chest, her arms wrapped around a ragged backpack as though it was the only thing left in the world worth protecting. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, frozen in thought. He was a man of numbers, figures, and empires. He built skyscrapers, owned businesses across continents, and was used to being saluted by chauffeurs and waited on by staff. Yet, none of that mattered in the presence of this simple, heartbreaking image. His daughter's question rang in his ears, not as a child's curiosity, but as a challenge. The woman's hair was tangled, strands falling across her pale face. Her clothes looked worn, every thread telling a story of hardship. Passers-by pretended not to notice her, some even pulling their coats tighter, as if acknowledging her existence would make them vulnerable. Ethan noticed how people walked faster, near her, their eyes sliding away, their steps echoing judgment, fear, or indifference. But his daughter, his sweet little girl, wouldn't move an inch. Her wide brown eyes, full of innocence and worry, were locked on the woman, silently demanding an answer her father didn't have. Ethan felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: compassion. He remembered his own late nights working in the cold years ago, before wealth came, before power became his shield. Back then, he had known hunger. He had known exhaustion. But he had buried those memories under layers of luxury and pride. Now, standing before this forgotten soul on the bench, those memories returned like whispers from his past. He knelt down slowly so he was at his daughter's level. She tugged his sleeve again, her voice softer this time. "Daddy, can we help her? Please?" There was no judgment in her tone, no hesitation, only pure innocence that saw humanity where adults saw inconvenience. Ethan looked at the woman again. She was asleep, though not peacefully. Her shoulders twitched as if shivering from cold, her lips parted slightly, breath shallow. The harsh winter breeze tugged at the thin fabric of her sweater. A businessman in a long coat walked past, muttering under his breath about how people should get jobs instead of wasting space. Ethan clenched his jaw. He hated that kind of cruelty. And yet, he realized with shame, he had been no different, most of his life. For the first time in a long while, Ethan acted not as a billionaire, not as the powerful Blake Enterprises CEO, but simply as a father. He slipped out of his own coat, heavy, warm, expensive, and gently draped it over the woman. The fabric slid across her shoulders, and though she didn't fully wake, she stirred, murmuring faintly. Ethan stood up again, his daughter smiling up at him as though he had just done the greatest thing in the world. Crowds kept passing, some staring in mild surprise, others pretending not to see. But Ethan didn't care about them. He only cared about the small hand in his and the silent gratitude in his daughter's eyes. At that moment, he realized something profound. Children see truth adults forget. Where the world saw a burden, his daughter saw a human being. As the woman shifted under the warmth of his coat, Ethan's heart shifted too. He didn't yet know her story. He didn't know her name, her struggles, or her pain. But one thing he knew with absolute certainty: tonight was not going to end with him walking away like everyone else. Something inside him had changed. And it all started with a little girl's question that pierced through the armor of his wealth. And deep down, he sensed that this encounter wasn't just a passing moment of pity. It was the beginning of something. He couldn't yet explain. A chapter of his life that money could never have written. The woman stirred slowly, her eyelashes fluttering against her cheeks as if waking from a long, restless dream. When her eyes opened, she saw not the usual cold faces of strangers hurrying past, but a little girl staring at her with gentle curiosity. Startled, she sat up quickly, clutching her backpack closer, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. I'll leave right away. Her words carried a weight of shame, as though she expected nothing but rejection. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled under her, betraying exhaustion. Before she could step away, Ethan's daughter reached out, her tiny fingers wrapping around the woman's hand with childlike boldness. No, don't go, please don't go. Daddy, she looks so cold. That small gesture froze the woman in place. She looked down at the girl's hand, soft and warm against her own chilled skin, and her lips parted in disbelief. She wasn't used to kindness anymore. People walked by her every day without so much as a glance. And now, here was this little girl, treating her like she mattered. Ethan stood silently, his sharp businessman's eyes studying the woman. He noticed the faint bruises of hardship, dark circles beneath her eyes, the hollow of her cheeks, the way her clothes clung to her frame. Yet there was something in her posture, even in her brokenness, that hinted at strength. He cleared his throat gently. What's your name? She hesitated, as if saying it out loud might cost her the last piece of herself. Finally, she whispered, Grace. Grace, Ethan repeated, the name lingering on his tongue. His daughter smiled brightly, as though the introduction was the most natural thing in the world. Hi, Grace, I'm Lily. This is my daddy. Grace nodded faintly, but her eyes darted to the expensive suit Ethan wore, the polished shoes, the aura of wealth he carried like a second skin. Her shoulders tensed. People like him didn't usually stop for people like her. She expected judgment, maybe even pity. Instead, she saw something she hadn't anticipated, concern. Lily tugged her father's sleeve again. Daddy, can we take her home? She can't stay here. What if it gets colder? Grace's face flushed red. No, I can't let you do that. I'll manage. I always manage. Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the lie. Ethan stayed quiet, his thoughts heavy. A part of him, the hardened CEO, whispered that this wasn't his responsibility, that he should walk away like everyone else. But another part, the part his daughter awakened, couldn't ignore her plea. He needed to understand. Grace, tell me, how did this happen? For a moment she said nothing, her pride fighting her vulnerability. Then, with a sigh, she lowered her gaze. I used to be a teacher, 5th grade. I loved it. But the school cut staff, and I was one of them. I thought I'd find another job quickly. I didn't. Bills piled up, rent went unpaid, and little by little everything slipped away. I stopped calling people for help, because no one answered anymore. So, I stopped asking. Her voice broke, but she lifted her chin, unwilling to let tears fall. I'm not lazy. I just ran out of places to go. Ethan's chest tightened. He had heard countless stories of failure in boardrooms, but none had ever struck him this way. There was no laziness in her eyes. There was dignity, buried under exhaustion. His daughter, too young to understand the full weight of the story, only tightened her grip on Grace's hand. You can come with us, Lily insisted softly. We have lots of rooms. You can stay in mine if you want. Grace shook her head quickly. No, I can't. I don't want charity. Ethan spoke then, his tone firm but gentle. It's not charity, it's humanity. You've been carrying this burden alone long enough. Let us help. Grace blinked, stunned. She had expected pity. Maybe a coin or two tossed her way. She had never expected an invitation into someone's life. Her heart battled between gratitude and fear. Fear of being a burden, fear of false promises. But when she looked at the little girl's face, so pure, so unwavering in its kindness, she felt something break inside her. Resistance. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in months, she let herself whisper words she hadn't dared to speak. Thank you. Ethan extended his hand, not as a billionaire, but as a man choosing compassion over indifference. Grace looked at it for a long moment before placing her own trembling hand in his. His daughter clapped her hands delighted, as though a great adventure had just begun. That night, under the bright city lights, Ethan made a decision that would change all of their lives. Grace would not spend another night on a cold bench, not while he and his daughter had the power to make a difference. And as the three of them walked together toward his waiting car, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of purpose that money alone could never give. The ride back to Ethan's mansion felt like stepping into another world for Grace. She sat stiffly in the back seat of the sleek black car, her worn backpack clutched tightly against her chest, as though someone might take it away. The leather, seats, the faint scent of luxury, the silent driver up front. Everything felt foreign to her. Beside her, little Lily leaned comfortably against her arm, chatting with the innocence of a child who had no understanding of social boundaries. "Grace, you'll love our house," Lily said with a grin that could melt the coldest heart. "It's big. Daddy says it's too big for just us. Now it won't be too big anymore." Grace smiled faintly, though nerves twisted inside her. She couldn't shake the thought that she didn't belong in whatever world they came from. But when she glanced at Ethan, seated across from her, his gaze wasn't cold or judgmental. He wasn't scrolling through his phone or acting distracted. He was watching her with quiet thoughtfulness, as though he was studying not the mess she appeared to be, but the strength hidden beneath. When the car pulled up the long driveway, Grace's breath caught. The mansion rose like a palace against the night sky, its grand windows glowing with warm light, the manicured gardens surrounding it, as if painted into perfection. She hesitated at the doorway, her shoes scraping softly against the polished marble floor inside. "I really don't think I should," she began, but Lily tugged her hand and laughed. "You're already here, silly, come on." They entered the dining hall, where a table stretched longer than any classroom Grace had ever taught in. A staff member appeared, startled at the unfamiliar guest, but Ethan waved his hand firmly. "She's with us." Those 3 words struck Grace like lightning. She's with us. It had been years since she had belonged anywhere. Dinner was served, and Grace sat hesitantly at the edge of her chair, her posture stiff. The aroma of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and creamy soup filled the air. She hadn't had a hot meal in days, maybe longer. Lily filled her plate eagerly, sliding it toward her as if it were the most natural thing to do. "Here, Grace. You need lots of food so you can be strong again." Grace blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. She whispered a shaky thank you and picked up her fork. The first bite nearly undid her. The warmth spread through her chest, not just from the food, but from the overwhelming kindness she hadn't expected. Ethan watched silently, his own appetite forgotten, as if witnessing her eat was more important than the meal in front of him. Over the next few days, the mansion changed in ways even Ethan hadn't anticipated. Grace, though still carrying the fragility of her struggles, began to move with more steadiness. She spent hours with Lily, teaching her math tricks, helping her with school projects, and reading her bedtime stories with the voice of a teacher who once had classrooms of children to inspire. The little girl adored her instantly, following her around the house like a shadow. Ethan found himself listening outside the library door one evening, hearing Lily's giggles as Grace acted out characters from a book. It stirred something in him, a memory of laughter that had been missing for too long. His life had been about power, wealth, and building an empire. Yet in the span of a week, he realized his home had been nothing more than walls and chandeliers until Grace walked through its doors. But Grace carried guilt too. One night, she approached Ethan hesitantly as he worked in his study. "I should leave soon," she said softly. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. You've already done more than I could ever ask." Ethan set his pen down and looked up at her. "Grace, look at me." She lifted her eyes reluctantly. "This isn't charity. You've brought something into this house that money never could. My daughter smiles more because of you. She learns because of you. And me?" He paused, his voice thickening. I've remembered what it means to be human again. Because of you. If anyone should thank someone, it's me." Grace's breath caught, and for once she couldn't find words. She simply nodded, swallowing back the lump in her throat. Weeks turned into months, and what began as a single act of compassion grew into a bond none of them could deny. Grace found herself not only healing, but thriving. She took on tutoring jobs, slowly rebuilding her independence, while still remaining deeply connected to Ethan and Lily. Ethan, once known as a ruthless tycoon, began to change too. He started donating anonymously to schools, sponsoring teachers, funding programs for children who had nothing. His colleagues wondered what had happened to the man who never cared for anything but profit. But Ethan didn't care. His true wealth was sitting at his dinner table every night, his daughter's laughter, and the woman who had reminded him that empires built on kindness outlast those built on greed. One evening, as they sat together, in the garden under the stars, Lily nestled between them. She asked innocently, "Daddy, is Grace going to stay with us forever?" The question hung in the air. Grace froze, her heart racing, uncertain of what to say. But Ethan reached out, his hand gently covering Grace's. He looked at his daughter, then at Grace, his voice steady. "Yes, she's family now." Grace's eyes shimmered with tears she could no longer hold back. She had once been invisible, discarded, forgotten. Now she was seen, valued, loved. She looked at Ethan and whispered the only words that could capture her heart. "Thank you for giving me a home again." Ethan shook his head. "No, Grace. Thank you for giving us one." And under the glow of the night sky, the three of them sat together, no longer strangers brought together by chance, but a family, forged by compassion, love, and the courage to see humanity where others saw nothing. The man who thought money was his greatest achievement finally understood the truth. The richest life is not the one filled with wealth, but the one filled with love.